One of the hardest parts of starting over is realizing that it doesn't feel like a fresh start at all. You thought it would feel lighter, cleaner, like a new chapter, but instead, you feel tired, a little heavy, and honestly, not as excited as you thought you'd be. Starting over doesn't always feel like a fresh start. And sometimes, my friend, it just feels exhausting. And then there's this thought that sneaks in. Shouldn't I feel better than this? But here's what most people don't talk about. Starting over usually comes after something ended. And even if that ending was necessary, it still took something out of you. So, of course, you don't feel instantly excited. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from experience, from grief, from everything you just walked through. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from everything you've been through. I remember when I made the decision to move from the beach to the city. I was actually excited. It felt like this was going to be a fresh start, like I was finally going to be able to create a life that was just fully mine. New city, new routines, new possibilities, clean slate. And I really believed it was going to feel energizing. But when I got here, it felt very different than I expected. Neighbors weren't very welcoming. My kids didn't reach out like I thought they would. The days felt rather quiet and lonely. Simple things felt harder, like I just didn't know where I belonged. And there were moments where I just felt like a stranger in my own life. I had left behind familiarity, the places I knew, the rhythms that felt easy, ugh, the friendships that took years to build. And I think what surprised me most was realizing how long it actually takes to make a new place feel like home. Because it's not just about moving, it's about rebuilding your routines, your connections, your sense of belonging. And my friend, none of that happens overnight. There were moments where I caught myself thinking, why does this still feel so unfamiliar? I mean, shouldn't I feel more settled by now? But slowly, little things started to shift. A familiar coffee spot, a conversation that turned into a connection, and a place that started to feel a little more like mine. And what I began to understand was this: it wasn't that something was wrong, it was that I was in the middle of building something new. I was building. And there's this pressure we put on ourselves when we start over, like we're supposed to suddenly feel confident and clear and ready, but life doesn't work like that. No one talks about how starting over can feel heavier before it feels lighter. And then something else starts to happen. You see, you knew this would take time. You've lived long enough to expect that. But now it starts to feel like it's just taking too much time. You look at your calendar and you think, it's been months, maybe even a year. Why do I still feel like this? You expected it to take time, but not just this much time. And underneath that is a quiet fear. What if this is all there is and it doesn't get any better? But here's what's actually true: there is no universal timeline for starting over, no finish line where everything just suddenly clicks. Because healing, adjusting, rebuilding, starting over doesn't follow a schedule. What feels like too much time is often just your process unfolding, not behind, not delayed, just yours. You are exactly where you are meant to be on your own personal journey. I remember there was a stretch of time after I moved here where I kept thinking, gosh, shouldn't I be further along by now? Because I wanted it to feel like home faster. I wanted to have my people again, the kinds of friendships where it just feels easy. I wanted to feel settled in a routine, to walk into places and recognize faces, to feel like I belonged. But instead, it still felt unfamiliar, and the neighbors weren't getting any more warm and fuzzy. And honestly, that started to frustrate me. I would see other women out together laughing, connected, and it looked like they had this deep sense of friendship and community. And I would catch myself thinking, am I ever going to have that again? And when my mind would start going in different directions, I'd start thinking, well, maybe it's the city. Maybe I just picked the wrong place for the wrong reasons. And maybe this just wasn't going to work out the way I thought it would. And even moving closer to my kids, I had this expectation I'd be seeing them more often. And when that didn't happen the way I imagined, that felt disappointing too. Let me tell you a secret, my friend. The number one cause of disappointment is unmet expectations. You see, I thought I was building a new life, but what I was actually doing was judging it before it even had time to form. What I started to realize was this: it wasn't anything going wrong. It was that I was expecting something that actually takes time to happen quickly. We compare our timeline to what we think it should be, or even worse, to what we see in other people's lives. But you don't really see the full story in someone else's life. You only feel your own. Starting over isn't about changing your life, it's about emotionally catching up to the change. And that part takes longer than most people expect. But slowly, things do begin to shift. You don't notice it at first, but one day something feels a little easier, a little lighter, more like you again. I remember the first time I was walking down the street in my new city, and I actually recognized somebody walking towards me. I'd only met them once or twice at a coffee meetup, but I actually wrapped my arms around their neck and gave them a big hug, going, "Oh my gosh, I actually recognize you." So, if you're in a season of starting over right now, and it doesn't feel like a fresh, exciting new beginning that you thought it would be, maybe it feels like it's taking longer than it should, my friend, that doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It means you're human. There is no should, there is only your process. And just because it's taking time doesn't mean it's not working. If this resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe. I share conversations like this every week to help women navigate life transitions with more clarity, confidence, and courage.